My previous ended with a professor here amongst us asking me about applying some of these soft skills for purpose of training in classroom. See, generally, what happens is when, say, you want to, deliver a skill or rather understand an individual. At the same time, you do not have much time on hand. You can always ensure that you do a ice-breaking session in such a way that you are able to also capture some of the traits of the individual, because one important aspect for any soft skills training is that you must have a complete understanding, rather knowledge of who the individual on the other side is. Okay. Now suppose, see, not always we can drive it through the SWOT analysis, although that is one excellent way of trying to identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of an individual. Yet another way, another ice-breaking session with with an intent to have a clearer insight into the audience whom you are addressing. You could administer a session where you try and unearth the category of feelings that the individual is primarily characterized by. Now, what are some of the primary feelings that you could categorize? One is being happy, the other is sad, the third is being angry, fourth being scared, fifth being confused, sixth being strong, and the seventh being weak. So, I have categorized the feelings into 7 broad categories of happy, sad, angry, scared, confused, strong, or weak. Then you ask the individuals, the students, how would you describe yourself? So when you ask them to describe themselves, give them certain parameters. Now, when you say happy, an individual, these are all, it's all about black and white. It's not only about black and white, but different shades of gray. Okay, so it is in this context that now when even an individual were to describe himself or herself as happy, is the individual, when she says she's happy, is she excited, is she elated, or is she overjoyed? This is the highest degree. The moderate degree would be to be cheerful, to be upbeat, to be good, and at a lower level, the individual, when she say she's happy, could be just content, could be just glad, could be satisfied. So within this happiness, there are several shades of happiness. Okay, from being just happy to being moderately happy to be super excited. Same way, when an individual calls himself sad, if he were to characterize himself as being sad, is he in a state of hopelessness, sorrowful and depressed? Or is the individual sorry, lost and bad? Or is he moderately placed at being upset, distressed and down? So there is a varying categorization within the sadness. Now if he or she were to say that, I'm an angry young man, angry, okay? Then what is the extent of anger? Is the individual predominated by feelings of furiousness, seething, and enraged? Or is he just uptight, dismayed, and put out? See, there are extremes. One is very high, one is low. Or is the individual moderate in being, kind of annoyed, frustrated, and agitated? Same way, if you say an individual, if the individual says he's scared or she's scared, is the individual very scared? Meaning to say, she or he is characterized by fearfulness, by being panic, being afraid, or is the individual just timid, unsure, and nervous? Where does the individual fall? Or is he moderately feeling threatened, insecure, and uneasy? And then, say if the individual is in a state of confusion, then is the person bewildered? Is he trapped somewhere and troubled? Or is it just that he is kind of bothered, is uncomfortable, and is therefore undecided? Or does he fall under the moderate category where the individual is disorganized, everything is mixed up, is foggy? And if the individual were to characterize himself or herself as being strong, there also, at the higher degree, the individual could be very potent, influencing, very potent, could be super powerful. Or the individual could be, at the lower level, could be sure, could be just secure. Or at the moderate level, the individual could be just, something like being energetic, being confident and capable. Where does the individual, places himself? And if the individual were to say that he or she is weak, is it because the individual feels overwhelmed, some form of impotence, or feels very small, incapable of doing things? Or is it that the individual is insecure and shaky, or rather the individual is very soft? And on the moderate level, you could see him as being incapable, helpless, and insecure. So, depending upon how the individual describes himself or herself, you see, you could gauge what is the nature of an individual. Here, there is caution that needs to be exercised, because many times the individual tries to say what he or she is not. In this whole gambit of soft skills training, one thing you must make very clear is that when an individual goes through an experiential learning and tries to examine where he or she stands, care must be taken to either look at things from a personal perspective or from a professional perspective. In one context, one cannot see from a personal perspective, and in another context, see oneself from a professional perspective. The two of them just don't gel well. For example, I'm just telling you. Now, from a personal perspective, one second, please. Madam, I'm in an online session. I've been cutting your call all the time. Please, I will call you back in 2 minutes, please. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, I was telling you, say, for example, me as an individual, if I have to describe myself in terms of my adaptability and harmony as an important element, from a personal front, I am the kinds who love peace. I am the kinds who wants to give in, at times, not feeling that I'm sacrificing, do it with willingness. And when it comes to the professional front, I am the kind of person who's fiercely competitive. So, when such is the situation, I should either examine myself purely from a personal perspective or from a professional perspective. I can't, for different dimensions, I can't look for one from a personal perspective, one from a professional perspective. Therefore, my friends, whenever you are training anyone, either students or executives or anybody, make sure that the trainee takes a clear stand on the perspective from which he or she wants to examine herself or himself. This is one thing very important. Yeah, I was talking about these categories of feelings. When you administer this test, one, you are giving an opportunity for the individual to re-examine or reflect on oneself in terms of how he or she describes himself or herself. Now, that is important for you as a trainer to understand about the trainees that you are going to address. Maybe, yes, not just to listen to what they say, but draw from them who has certain predominant skills where the strength is being displayed. Look at individuals, who are passives, identify them, and use that context when you are delivering a training program. If you have any questions at this point, I will just keep moving on. Instruments after instruments I would like to talk about. If there is any question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask me a question. Okay. Then, you see, in the opening, I told you, you need to know your audience. How do you get to know your audience? Ask them to describe. Answer the question. Who am I? What makes me unique? This is a question that they should answer. If I had a lot of time on my hand, if I had done a week-long program for you, maybe I would have put you through all of these tests, where you as an individual will talk about your personal brand. Now, what aspects? Ask them, what aspects about me? It is something that they will ask themselves. What aspects about me never change? What is it that I'm so stubborn about? What should I do to change? Because to tell them that if there is a paradigm paralysis, and if there is one thing that you have to change that can change the entire course of your path to success, what is it? Okay. When you ask them a question like this, it helps them to reflect back on their lacunars. Then ask them, what do you do that you are good at? What experiences of you support this? So they are able to identify their strengths. Also ask them, how can I leverage these aspects, what you call as strengths, in a memorable way, where they put a brief statement. And how can this statement that they have, whatever they conceive, make me better understood about myself in terms of my professional and personal goals? So this kind of a test, probably a questionnaire, where you get the participants to answer on, will enable you to kind of, try and understand the makeup of the individual. Okay, what are the individual's traits you could identify? Particularly, say, when we do laboratory exercises, training programs that run to, you have a single, say, You put them through a workshop where you as a resource person run through the program for a period of 8 to 10 days. It is so important that you must understand, feel the pulse of the trainer. You must understand the composition of the individual trainee. So these are certain things that you should ask. Further, you see, you must try and see whether the individual is engaged in what is called as personal branding. See, personal branding is not about self-promotion. It's not at all about self-promotion or call it as marketing tactics. It is much more fundamental than that. Now, personal branding is something that is clear, that is deep, that has a, where you have a profound understanding of your own self, of who you are and what you stand for. So, it requires you to do a careful study of your own self, where there is a quest on your part to understand where you as an individual excel and where you can leverage some of your attributes. So, the tips to brand oneself would be, first of all, to identify and build things that help the person, you as a person, to make an impact. So identify the qualities that would distinguish you from the rest. Okay, ask yourself, what is the distinct feature that I have? Okay, and how does that use of that feature benefit the people around me? Then you ask yourself, how do you, what do you do actually to add value, or to add, something distinct, something measurable to your personality? Ask yourself, what do you do to feel proud of? So, personal branding is all about making yourself visible, because without visibility, you can't be distinct. So maybe it requires that, as for example, as faculty of a particular college, you sign up for various projects, extra assignments. You must, from your mind, eliminate that good enough attitude. Good enough is no good. Good enough means that you are thinking that doing a bare minimum is enough. That is, doing bare minimum jobs is good enough. No. Challenge yourself to go through that extra mile. Be available. Communicate effectively, in social and professional circles. So, through personal branding, you are improving yourself. You try to keep raising the bar on your own performance. You compete with your own self. You need not look for competitors outside. And it is impossible, growth cannot happen if you are not visible, if you are not participative, and if you are not collaborative. So, building brand for oneself is important if you have to tide high in your career. If you want to create a positive brand, you need to do things where you impact everyone with whom you interact. This is about personal branding. And friends, it is very important that you, I, and all of us here pay some thought to this exercise of personal branding. Somewhere, as we go through this, we will be in a position to identify our strengths, work on our weaknesses. Now, personal branding is not a one-time activity. Please understand. It is an ongoing activity. It is a process where a prescribed image or an impression of yourself is being created in the minds of people. So what are you doing? In effect, you are self-positioning yourself. And this is about how we must work towards personal branding and encourage your children. The students of, the students whom you interact with to engage in this activity of self-branding. Let them at least get that awareness. Sometimes we think that, children are small, they do not have that potential, they cannot live up to those expectations. I'm sorry. They are very smart. It is their absorption capacity is very, very high. It is only that we must create platform for them to think on these lines. And coming to the exercises on personality. You see, we've all heard, I don't know, many of you may not be from this management background, but however, let me tell you that there are big 5 dimensions for understanding individual personality. One is extroversion. Now, the extroversion dimension is one which captures your comfort level to interact with people, your comfort level to develop relationships. You see, extroverts are individuals who tend to be the gregarious kinds, who are very assertive, who are the sociable kinds, and whereas you will find the opposite of it, the introverts tend to be reserved, they tend to be timid, and they are quiet. The second dimension is one of agreeableness. Now, this dimension particularly refers to an individual's propensity to be accepted by others. People who are highly agreeable are people who are cooperative, who are warm, who are trustworthy, and they are the people who score high when it comes to agreeableness. Now, people who score low on agreeableness are individuals who tend to be very cold, snobbish. They tend to be, disagreeable. They tend to be, kind of antagonistic in their approach. Now, conscientiousness as a dimension of personality. See, conscientiousness means it's a measure of how reliable an individual is. It's a measure of reliability. A highly conscientious person is responsible, is organized, and tends to be dependent. As against this, an individual with a low score on conscientiousness tends to be easily distracted, he is disorganized and unreliable. And coming to the fourth dimension, that of emotional stability. Now, this dimension is often labeled by being conservative, being, neurotic, where the person's ability to withstand, okay? What is the person's ability to withstand maybe stress or crisis? So people with positive scores on emotional stability tend to be very calm, they tend to be confident, they tend to be secure. And individuals who score less on emotional sensitivity, or rather stability, tend to be individuals who are nervous, who are anxious, who are depressed, and kind of individuals who are, withdrawn and insecure. And the fifth dimension, important dimension of personality, is the openness to experience. That means it is a dimension that addresses the range of interests and fascination that people have. People who love novelty, who are excited about adventure, they are extremely open people. They are creative, they are curious, and they are artistically sensitive. Whereas individuals who are low in terms of openness tend to be very conventional. They don't go out of their comfort zone and do things that they are familiar. So these are the 5 important dimensions of personality. I said extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and openness to experience. Now, using this, you could, there are behavioral instruments which are being administered to see what is their score in terms of adjustment, what is their score in terms of sociability, what is their score in terms of openness, in terms of agreeableness, and in terms of conscientiousness. Very importantly, now as a trainer, when you were to interpret the scores, please remember that it must be done from a very holistic perspective and not go by individual dimension. See, for example, let us say between strong adjustment and weak adjustment, the individual, the more weak he is, he tends to be reactive. The more strong he is in terms of adjustment, he tends to be resilient. What does that mean? Being resilient means the individual is very secure, he is unflappable, the individual is very rational, he is guilt-free. So the individual is strong in terms of adjustment and therefore resilient. An individual who is weak in terms of adjustment tends to be reactive, meaning to say he's excitable, he's worrying, he's high-strung, he's alert, with weak adjustment. And the mid path is one where the individual tends to be between being resilient and reactive. The individual could be responsive. So he can either move towards strong adjustments, if neglected, can fall down to weak adjustment. Coming to the dimensions of sociability. An individual with high sociability is referred to as an extrovert, where the individual is not only assertive, sociable, is also warm, very optimistic and talkative. An individual, however, with low sociability, that means generally they are introverts, we call them as introverts, tend to be very private. They prefer being independent in their work, and they are the kinds who are reserved and difficult to read them. They're hard to be read. So between dimensions of within the sociability context, the individual could be an introvert or an extrovert, and the mid path that he could take as a progression of moving from introversion to extroversion could be being ambivert. Then coming to openness, how would you look at this? An individual who scores high in terms of openness is an individual who is an explorer, because he has broad interests, he is curious, he is liberal, and he is sometimes impractical and likes to do novel things, something new, unique. People with low openness, however, are people who are very practical, who try to be very conservative. They look into the depth of knowledge, they go vertical, they look for efficiency, expertise, they don't want to commit mistakes. They're more of preservers. So between being an explorer and a preserver, you could be midway as a moderator. And coming to the other dimension, one of agreeableness, an individual who is high on agreeableness is a trusting individual, he is humble, he is a team player, and the individual is conflict averse and generally tends to be very frank, no hide and seek. Therefore, the individual is more of an adapter. And when it comes to agreeableness, if he has a low score, he's the suspicious kind, he's skeptical, he keeps questioning, he's tough and aggressive, and there will be an element of self-interest, and therefore he will work as a challenger. Between an adapter and a challenger lies the role of being a negotiator. And coming to the last dimension of a personality, that of conscientiousness. When you say the individual, as I already have told you, he's high in terms of conscientiousness. That means he's being high in terms of being dependable, organized, disciplined, and kind of, cautious and stubborn. You will see that the individual is very focused. As against this, if he has a low score in conscientiousness, he tends to be very fun-loving, happy-go-lucky kind, spontaneous. He tries to experiment and is more unorganized. Therefore, you will see that his score is something low, which is more flexible in nature. Between being flexible and focused is the moderate score of being balanced. So, I told you, when you are interpreting, you must interpret it in its wholesomeness. Suppose an individual shows weak in terms of adjustment and also shows low sociability scores and also shows low openness, then it's a dangerous combination. Because the individual is reactive, he's low in terms, weak in terms of adjustment means that the individual tends to be very reactive, he could lose his temper, and doesn't even open up with people, so you cannot understand him. He's more of an introvert and has a tendency to be a preserver. He does not even, share, tends to be very, very conventional in his approach. So what happens? Bringing about change or transformation in such individuals is an ardent task, because the individual is very, very skeptical and I must say very suspicious of self and as well as of others. So what I was trying to say is, whenever you are examining, when you are administering this behavioral instrument, make sure that the scores are read in relation to each other. Now, this is as far as how we go about evaluating personalities. Now, at this point, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me before I move on to other instruments. Shall I take it forward? Say, for example, you want to check on the change readiness of an individual. Okay. Now, what aspects would you look into if you want to assess the change readiness? You will try to look at certain traits, for example, in terms of the resourcefulness of the individual. In terms of you will check on the adaptability of the individual. You will check on his level of optimism, the confidence that the individual enjoys, whether the individual is adventurous, whether the individual has tolerance for ambiguity, and whether the individual has passion and drive. So if you will score the individuals in terms, several statements are being drawn on each of these parameters, against each of these parameters. And depending upon what is the kind of score that you get, you will know what is the predominant trait of an individual that either fosters readiness to change or comes as an obstacle for moving towards change. So this is yet another instrument where you will look for change readiness in individuals. Now I will take you through a very important behavioral instrument called 5OB. See, you and I as teachers, are less endowed that way. See, if we were in the corporate, okay, holding some position, probably the industry would have spent lakhs of rupees on us to send us for training, and we could have been exposed to various behavioral instruments. As teachers, and I know what kind of exposures we have, particularly to advanced and higher levels of training. Nobody spends lakhs on us. It is always in form of a few hundreds or thousands. So why I'm telling you this is, these are the kind of behavioral instrument that is administered in these training workshops, where they would have paid for this instrument. Okay, they are all patented and they have copyrights for this. So it is not something easily available which they can administer anywhere and everywhere. So because there is a cost to it, generally such in training programs where they use these instruments, they make sure that the pricing of the training program covers these costs. Okay, a brief introduction to one of those complex, I call it complex because one needs to have utmost concentration while filling up this 5OB instrument. 5OB stands for Fundamental Interpersonal Relationship Orientation in terms of behavior. So, this is a 54-item questionnaire which was developed by Dr. Skirts, and it gained a considerable reputation for measuring significant variables very well. So the questionnaire measures 3 fundamental dimensions of interpersonal relationship. One is called as the inclusion, the second is called the control, and the third is called the affection. I, C, and A. I for inclusion, C for control, and A for affection. Now, inclusion, which we call as I, assesses the degree to which a person associates with others. Inclusion, his ability to associate with others. So here, the concepts of extroversion and introversion, the concept of moving towards people and moving away from people are very familiar terms of inclusion. Then we have what is called as control, which measures the extent to which a person assumes responsibility, making decisions, or the extent to which a person dominates people. That is called as control. And the third is affection. Now, this reflects the degree to which a person becomes emotionally involved with others. So, the test assumes that these 3 areas are fundamental in understanding, predicting interpersonal behavior. Although there are other factors, various other dimensions, these are the primary dimensions that can lend itself to meaningful inferences on individual behavior. So for each behavior, remember that there are 2 scores. One is called the E score and the other is called the W score. E score means expressed behavior. Score for expressed behavior. That is behavior which is overt, which is observable, and in the areas, and this exists in the areas of inclusion, control, and affection. E score, that is expressed score. And the W score is the wanted behavior. It represents the person's wanted behavior. And W score refers to what the person wants from other people. It could be in the area of inclusion, control, and affection. What is it that she seeks in their interpersonal relationship is less directly observable, but it is a valuable information in understanding and predicting the individual's behavior. See, if the score between E minus W, okay, is greater than or equal to 3, then it is said that the individual is out of balance, because your express score weighs over your wanted scores. For example, let us come to the point of inclusion. Say, I love to be honored, accepted, and considered important by others. Okay? I'm just giving you an example. It is not true with me, but I'm just giving you an example. I wish for that. Okay? But this is my express score. But my wanted score is, I don't want to go up to the person to talk. I do not want to engage or build any relationship with the individual, with the individuals other than, myself. I don't want to, initiate talks with them. I have my ego with me. If my wanted score and express score are not in balance, then I suffer from a personality disorder. There will be an element of negative score that will distort my personality, because when expression and want don't match, then you remain a frustrated individual. So, the scores when it comes to, suppose, now let us consider each one of them separately: inclusion, control, and affection. If there is a low expressed inclusion, it means that the person is uncomfortable around people, and it will tend to move away from, the individual will tend to move away from them. So the individual is under social. If the expressed inclusion score is high, it suggests that the person is comfortable in social settings and will tend to move towards people, therefore over social. There could also be a mid score where in inclusion, where it suggests that the person is comfortable in social settings and will tend to move towards a few people. Okay, so this is as far as the express inclusion goes. Now, sometimes coming to the control factor, if you have a low expressed control, that means that the person avoids making decision and taking responsibility. But there is a word of caution. Suppose, see, gender is a very important factor that you must consider. Suppose as a woman, I display low expressed control. It need not necessarily mean that I do not want to take charge of things. I am not capable of taking charge of things. It only may be because of the social setting within which I work, where maybe my husband or maybe some male member within the family tends to take decisions on behalf of us, and therefore I tend to take a backseat. I as a woman tend to take a backseat. So you must be very sure. There will be, whenever gender comes into picture, you cannot directly call them as anti-craft. The circumstances in which they operate may force them to be anti-crafts. Now, if the individual has high expressed control, it indicates that he or she can and does take on the responsibilities that is involved in a situation or a context where decisions have to be made. So, such people are generally referred to as autocrats. Same way, it is for, I can't go into great depths about each one of them. The final one is That of affection, I already gave you an example. With low expressed affection, the individual is described as being very cautious about initiating the developments of close, deep relationships. An individual with high expressed affection tends to suggest that people can readily become emotionally involved, establish deep relationships, and they tend to be over personal. So these are some of the ways in which you could interpret the 5B, where you talk about three important aspects. One is inclusion, control, and the third is affection. And this you see from an expressed perspective, from a wanted perspective. If the difference between expressed and wanted scores shows a negative value, then it means that the personality tends to get distorted because of the imbalance that is created between expressed and wanted. Now, why I told you all this is you must have some insight, some awareness of what a behavioral instrument is, or how it would be administered to people. Then comes the instrument on what you call as where you will measure the emotional intelligence of people. You say, when you look into emotional intelligence, maybe I think Dr. Ranjan Swami was asking me to do another session on emotional intelligence on Saturday. I will look into it, whether I will do on emotional intelligence or whether I would do something on performance blocking behavior. Let me get back to you. I will talk to Ranjan Swami and then let you know. So, talking about emotional intelligence, what is being measured? Your self-awareness, your ability to manage emotions, your ability to remain self-motivated. Now, these are the aspects: self-awareness, managing emotions, and staying self-motivated are the dimensions that come under intrapersonal aspect, within. Now, the interpersonal aspects, under intrapersonal aspect, I am talking about personal competence. When you are able to achieve this personal competence, it means you have moved from a stage of dependence to independence, which means you have gained private victory. Now, if in the sphere of interpersonal aspects, whose components are ability to relate well to others and the emotional mentoring, these are aspects of interpersonal dimensions, and therefore you will actually move from a phase of independence to interdependence, which we refer to as public victory. So, emotional intelligence, when you measure emotional intelligence, you look into two aspects. What is your score vis-a-vis self-awareness, managing emotions, and self-management when it or self-motivation when it comes to individual aspects. Okay, the individual behavior. And social behavior will check on, that is the social intelligence, which is one part of the emotional intelligence, where your ability to relate well with people and the emotional mentoring in terms of regulating self with others, this aspect, so you will look into the competency in this when you're looking at intrapersonal dimensions. So this is about very, very, I must say briefly, about the instrument of, what you call as emotional intelligence that is being administered. Then finally, let me come to what is called as conflict management or conflict resolution techniques. So there are instruments to examine what is your dominant style to resolve conflicts in an organization. So the conflict resolution techniques vary from individual to individual depending upon what is the individual's extent of assertiveness versus cooperativeness. If an individual is low in terms of assertiveness and also low in terms of cooperativeness, he is neither assertive nor cooperative, then the individual uses a style to resolve conflicts which is one of avoiding, being nowhere near people or problem, run away, escape from the scene. Sometimes this style does work. Sometimes it does remain effective, particularly when the matter at hand is too trivial and needs no great focus. Sometimes people make a mountain of a mole, and if the matter is very trivial and left to itself, it will die a natural death. Where the individual is high in terms of assertiveness, but low in terms of cooperativeness. He can assert himself well, but is not willing to cooperate. Then the individual uses a style of competing to resolve conflicts. Okay. If the individual is the other way around, where his capability to cooperate is high, but has poor assertiveness skills, then he tends to be more accommodating. He will say, okay, you take the lead. You will be given an opportunity over me. Okay, he takes the back seat. That's because he is less assertive while he is more cooperative. And then there is a style which is the collaborative style, supposedly to be the most ideal of styles. A collaborative style is one where the individual is high in terms of cooperativeness and high in terms of assertiveness. The individual speaks with facts and figures. He knows how to balance and moderate his feelings in order that he is able to get to the other individual. He has persuasive skills. He has the ability to convince people. He has the ability to look at things from a win-win perspective situation, and the individual is healthy because the problem at hand is more important than the process. The who and how of it is not so important, but the who of it is not important, but the how of it is more important. So process is given more importance in terms of conflict resolution. So this is the phase where you work on a win-win situation. And supposedly the best and the most idealistic of conflict resolution models. Between using the avoiding style and the collaborating style, the worst and the best, there is a midway, middle of the path, which is called as compromising. Now, compromising is a situation where you are moderate both in terms of assertiveness and cooperativeness. But there what you do is, because your intention is to compromise, you will conditionally accommodate, meaning to say that I will provide you this, I will be okay with this, provided you will be okay with me the next time. So there is a rider there. Okay, so it is conditional accommodation. So where and how do you use these conflicting styles? You use the competing style of conflict resolution when there is a need for quick and decisive action. Okay, where the action is vital, it has to be quick. You use this competing style. The style is, however, unpopular, but required and need to be implemented. And this is possible when you know that you are right. And you can take advantage of this behavior when people are display non-competitive behavior. Now, when do you use the avoiding style? If the matter is trivial, if the issue is trivial, or when you perceive the chance of winning, or when others can solve the problem better than you, or even when you want people and the situation to cool down, you don't want to put your hands in it. Time itself will be a great healer. In such situation, you use the avoiding style. You use the accommodative style when you find that you are wrong. You feel that something is a mistake on your part, so therefore you let go and allow the other individual to take over. Or if you have a wish to cooperate with others, or maybe you want to have some social credit. People must say, look at him or look at her, how she gave up. Sonia Gandhi gave up on her possible prime ministership at one point. She tried to get social mileage. So get social credits by giving in. Or sometimes you use the accommodate style when you expect others to learn from their mistake. You pay way for that. You show how you are correcting and also pay way for others to follow suit. That is when you use the accommodative style. You use the collaborative style when your intent is to have an integrative solution, when your objective is to learn from somebody's expertise, or when you know that you can gain commitment by transforming your concerns into consensus, agree with the other individuals. And sometimes we do a self-reflective action there. We work on our feelings, that have interfered or come in the way of good actions. So that is when you will use the collaborative style. And as a middle of the road style, you use the compromising style when you feel that the goals are worthier than the efforts of assertive mode or disruptive mode. And when you feel that the opponents are of equal power, okay, both are equally committed, both are mutually exclusive in their attempts to achieve goals, go for this compromise style, where you're going to make temporary settlements. And you know that at this point, compromise is the only answer, neither collaboration nor competition. In such situations, you use the compromise style. So these are ways in which you put to use the various conflict resolution modes. Finally, coming to the leadership part. You see, there are various leadership, there are n number of models, n number of styles. But characteristic features of some of these leadership styles I would like to draw your attention to. See, when a leadership, instrument called leadership, so one instrument I'm talking about is leadership, adaptiveness and descriptive, adaptiveness and LEAD, leadership effectiveness for adaptability and descriptiveness, something like that it is there. So suppose you administer this kind of a leadership, you will get to know what is your dominant style of leadership. You could be a deserter lead, you could possess a deserter leader style. You could have a missionary leadership style. You could be an autocrat. You could be a compromiser as a leader. You could be a bureaucrat. You could have a developer leadership style. Or you may be not an autocrat, but a benevolent autocrat style. Or you may possess the democratic leadership style. So you will see that each of these styles have their own characteristics. Excuse me. So depending upon what is your the score of your leadership traits, you tend to you tend to get to be bracketed with that particular style. Now a deserter is one who does not show much interest in maintaining good relationship. A deserter leader. He does not always show a lot of interest in the work of his subordinates, and he believes that the value of creativity, change, or innovation is often overemphasized. All that is not required. They tend to supply more useful information to others, than use that information for self. And they show very little concern about the possible errors. Usually, they do very little when it comes to, efforts for correcting things. Their deviations are there. Therefore, they are referred to as a deserter leader. So we have somebody called as a missionary leader. These missionary leaders attach a lot of importance. High relationship orientation is there. But when it comes to task orientation, they are poor. They are less effective. And they are perceived as individuals who are primarily interested in what is called as harmony. They like being liked. So they are individuals who treat the subordinate with kindness and consideration. Yenadru problems tavond bandre, they will be the first one to give you leave. Will try to get into your skin and try to solve your problems. These missionary leaders also allow the subordinates to set their own objectives according to their needs. They accept them, even if it is unsatisfactory, they accept it. And they are the people who tolerate deviations while implementing plans. Secondly, they are very, very tolerant people. They only want to avoid unpleasantness. And they are individuals who tend to, who see signs of conflict, and their job is to smoothen out any possible conflict. And they believe that if an error occurs, it should be corrected in such a way that it doesn't upset anyone. They don't call a spade a spade. Tumba diplomatic agi adan resolve madakogtare. Now, in order to be liked, missionary leadership, they want to be popular and they'll be liked. So they will avoid all possible unpleasantness that affect decision-making process. As against this, there is an autocratic leadership style. As the very term autocrat says, they are high taskmasters, very high on task orientation, but very low relationship orientation. What your problem is, what you're suffering with, matters not to me. Go and jump into the way. For me, the task has to be completed, the targets have to be achieved. So, they are the people who are characterized by, where they have a tendency to direct the work of the subordinates, where they are people who will discourage any forms of deviations. They can't empathize with you, even if it is genuine. Okay, for them, planning is very important, and sticking to the plan is even more important. And they are the people who try to introduce change by making an announcement. They don't seek your suggestions. They don't look into your comfort levels. They don't weigh or value your suggestions. They watch the implementation very closely, and they breathe on your neck. They supervise very closely, and they keep on pointing out errors. They are very critical of your work. They keep criticizing. Blame gaming will oftenly take place, and they are interested in day-to-day productivity rather than long-term productivity. And there are people who create threatening situation in order that performance is maintained. And then you have the compromiser leadership style, where you will see that there is a moderate orientation. Rather, I must say there is a high task orientation as well as high relationship. Relationship orientation, compromiser, and moderate task orientation. Now, here you will see that compromisers tend to deal with subordinates in such a way that they combine both task and relationships, and don't let others suffer in any forms. They are people who will encourage new ideas, new ways of new solutions. They will do follow-up work. They will be very clear when it comes to giving instructions, and they tend to do planning very meticulously. So compromisers are people who like the idea of teamwork. And then you have the bureaucratic leadership style, who believe in red tapeism. They are people who believe in formal meetings. They are, they only want to see people produce new ideas. Their plans require fine attention to details. They introduce change very formally, and they have very closely established procedures, everything put in black and white. And they are people who are very high in task orientation, but low in terms of relationship orientation. They respond to disagreements. They take up conflicts head on. Okay, they refer to rules and procedures, and they will make their subordinates feel that they fall short of seeking responsibilities. So the bureaucrat is, very uncompromising. And then you have finally the developer leadership style, where you will see that for them both relationships and tasks are important. They appreciate new ideas. They motivate people to be creative. They are responsible for planning. They involve people, the subordinates, in the planning process. They prepare people for change, so nothing comes to them as a rude shock. When conflicts arise, they help people to find an amicable solution. And where errors arise, they have alternative solutions to resolve or find reasons to mitigate the errors. So developers tend to be very tolerant and encourage people to be innovative. And then we have the benevolent autocratic, and finally the democratic leadership style, where both democratic leaders are both high in terms of task orientation and high in terms of relationship orientation. And a democratic leader is one who believes in the ability of his subordinates. He believes that they seek responsibility, that it is worthy of giving them that accountability because they are capable of performing. And here the democrat, sets objectives which are very logical with the consent and involvement of his subordinates. Information is shared with all concerned, and he would actively support and promote a team approach. So these are the various characteristics of various types of leadership styles. Now, I have tried in my 1 hour 15 15 minutes that I've had at my disposal, the various types of behavioral instruments that are being used in the process of evaluating the soft skills of individual. Now I am open to questions. If there are no questions, then I'd be happy to say goodbye.
Just one question. You did. You were talking about the various dimensions of personality, and you did.
Let me first thank you for at least speaking on this platform. Yes, sir.
No. Thank you. It was a very interesting presentation. In fact, you tried to cover a lot many things. And due to time constraint, obviously, it becomes, and that too in a virtual mode. One thing I would like to ask you is when you're talking about dimensions of personality, I think you did mention gender as one of the factors which need to be taken into consideration. Do you think that social
context of personality, but in the context of understanding relationship with respect to inclusion, affection, and control?
Yes.
Gender as an element may limit or act as a constraint on us to express our affection.
Do you think that,
or in a male-dominated society, the opportunities available for a woman, for example, to take charge or control of a situation may be of less proximity. So it is in this context that gender becomes an issue, I said. Okay. With this clarification, please ask me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, do you think that along with gender, socio-cultural background should also be taken into consideration? Do you think that to an extent?
Absolutely, sir, because empowerment, see, whenever we take a decision or whenever we communicate or stand for a cause, how much empowered we are is a very important issue. Sometimes we may lack social empowerment, sometimes we may lack economic empowerment, and that could be irrespective of the gender. When you lack this, you lack confidence. You know, to stand to stand your decision, you need to, these are certain I must say aspects that are very unconsciously driven within us. Okay. And it takes a lot of guts to come out of it, even if there is a deficiency. I remember times when, I come from from a middle class family, where my stand during days of hardship itself was, I am second to none. I mean, nobody can exploit me. That is a stand that you consciously take. So you tend to be very defensive, sometimes even aggressive to prove your stand. You get this? So generally what happens is we fall into that, we fall into that ditch somewhere, feeling that, that there is that inferiority complex that will rock us because of lack of either social empowerment or economic empowerment.
Yes, thank you, madam. One more last thing. You did talk about self-branding as well. So self-branding, personal branding, you did talk about it. So is it also related to the way how in present times people have started using social media platforms?
Very much, very much. Social media is one potent tool to bring about visibility to your individual self. Okay, that is one of the potent. Today, everybody is trying to market themselves through these social medias, and of course, there is a constructive mode and there is a disruptive mode as well within this. You are 200% right.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yeah. Is there anybody who wants to talk? Okay. Shall we call it a day? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasure being in your office. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Nice session. Informative session.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Namaskar.
Thank you, madam.